Morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm extremely excited to present this information to you because, once you see what we've been doing in this project, we actually have a real life example of what this project could look like and should look like. So we're very excited to have them share a little bit about how they got started and what they're doing now and what they're going to do into the future. So, but before we get to that information, I just want to start out by saying I'm Steve Jurch. I am the Associate Vice President at the Center for Policy and Practice at ACCT. And I am joined by my esteemed colleague, Mia Simpson. She is our Kids on Campus Director in the Center for Policy and Practice. So she is the one actually implementing and running this project. And with us today, we have the panel of experts. So we have Jarrett Carter. He's the Vice President of External Affairs, Communications, and Advancement at Howard Community College. We have Feli Sola Carter. She is the Interim Vice Chair, the Board of Trustees at Howard Community College. And finally, we have Tracy Broccolino. She's the President of the Community Action Council of Howard County. And so what we want to talk a little bit about, this project is around co-locating Head Start centers on community college campuses. And we're going to start out by framing the conversation. We all know that on our campuses and actually across the country, childcare is an issue, right? The expense, the availability and access, geography, location. So this is not limited to community college campuses, but there are a lot of benefits to having childcare on campus. So the other thing that we know about students at community colleges is they need additional supports often, right? It's not the academic support, it's life, it's transportation, childcare, food insecurity a lot of times. And so what we're trying to do with this project, we know that childcare is one of the significant barriers to students, and so this type of partnership, and you're gonna hear how amazing this partnership actually is a great solution to this issue to help our students succeed. So I want to start out a little bit about talking about who our student parents are, right? I'm not going to go into reading all the figures, but what I think I want to highlight is 22% of learners in higher education are student parents. That's a significant amount of people. The gist of this slide is they are on your campus. Whether you want to recognize that or not, they're there, right? And I think one interesting fact that I like to highlight is any of you who are parents, I'm a parent myself, I know how challenging it can be to manage parenting plus any other activity, work, extracurricular, especially academics, right? So you would think, oh, they're so busy, they have so much going on, they're not gonna necessarily perform that well because they have all these distractions. Well, actually, student parents perform at a higher level than non-student parents. So it is a critical demographic to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to support them. I think another interesting fact is out of student parents, a majority of them are at community colleges. And this doesn't necessarily mean students of very young children. It could mean students who are parenting, high school age, or those individuals that are coming back to higher education. They may have, college age kids themselves. So you may see the parent and their child at the same institution. So with this project, we know that there are a lot of different ways to support student parents. So why did we choose Head Start? So many of you may have additional grants that support student parents, like the C-Campus grant, which means childcare access means parents in school. Sorry, I should know this, but it's one of those tongue twisters. There's also often state scholarships or vouchers, depending on what state you're in, for supporting childcare. But then there's also Head Start. And this is not a new conversation. Head Start and community college partnerships have been discussed since the 60s. When we first launched this project, we had meetings with the Federal Office of Head Start under Health and Human Services, and they were like, yeah, we've been talking about this since the 60s. We just don't know why it hasn't happened yet. And so Head Start, one of the major reasons that we've heard why child care centers on campuses close is financial, right? It's hard to braid funding. It's hard to have sustainable funding. Even the C Campus grant is usually in 3-year cycles. Well, Head Start, one of the reasons is they are a federally funded program, so they have a steady funding stream, right? So the grants come from the federal agency directly to the grantees. It doesn't flow through the state like other programs. They provide comprehensive early learning services. It's not just daycare. It is education, healthcare, family stability, nutrition. So there's all of these things, and it's not, and I'll let Tracy speak to she's the Head Start expert, but I know this is not just for the children, it supports the parents too, right? So this is a very comprehensive program. Now, the service areas often overlap between Head Starts and community colleges, and what we've found is that there are currently 130 co-located centers across the country, and out of almost 3,000 campuses across the country. So that's not a very large percentage. So we hope this type of project will help increase those. The other thing that is positive or a good reason to partner with Head Start is they have flexibility in their funding. C Campus grants, for instance, can't be used for facility renovation. Head Start has funding that can be used for facility renovation. So there's a lot more flexibility. They have more control over how they spend the funds. And so it just made a lot of sense, which leads me to my next slide called Partnership That Just Makes Sense. So the other piece is that Head Start centers, the median distance between campus and a Head Start is only 1.5 miles. So they're already close to each other. Now you may say, well, that they're only 1.5 miles away, so let's just not worry about bringing them on campus. Well, that 1.5 miles, if you've ever tried to walk 1.5 miles with a toddler, good luck. So the other thing is that the student parents, majority of them do have children who are 0 to 5, which is the eligibility or the requirement for a Head Start. The other thing is this is not co-locating Head Starts. Head Starts don't necessarily stay in one location forever. Moving a Head Start moves location on, I won't say a regular basis, but it's not uncommon. A lot of Head Start centers are in K-12 systems. Well, if that enrollment at that particular elementary school skyrockets, they'll say, well, sorry, we need that classroom. So now you have to find a new space. The other thing is if they're paying an exorbitant amount of rent somewhere, we may say, okay, it's, and we'll talk about why the partnership makes sense. The college may be able to provide free or low cost space. So it does make sense. Now, so when we talk about what each organization can bring to the table, we mentioned some of this already. Head Start is comprehensive support to children and families. They're federally funded. They offer additional services. They have funding to support workforce education. And gee, how convenient it is if their employees have access to these funds to pay for them to go through school, that they're at the school they're going to go to, right? So there's those types of advantages. Community colleges can bring free or low-cost space. I know when I used to work at the Community College of Baltimore County, and I got questioned all the time about space utilization, right? How often are you using your classrooms? If your classrooms are sitting vacant, you want to go ask for more capital funds from the county, they're going to say you're not using the space that you have. This is a great way to use that space. Obviously, we can address workforce needs at the community college. It provides a practicum location, not just for early childhood education students, but things like dental hygiene, nursing, even automotive. We had an example where a Head Start had purchased vans and buses to transport students back and forth. The automotive program at the community college maintained those vehicles for free, right? So it was a win-win. And then obviously you have access to college courses. So this makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of reasons. I'm not going to say that you can just turn it on a dime. There's a lot of work that goes into these partnerships, but I think the work is definitely worth it because of the sustainability of this partnership. So I'm going to turn it over to Mia now. She's going to talk about what the actual project is, and then we're going to get into conversation with our partnership over here. So Mia?
So good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Mia Simpson, and I'm excited to be the director of this wonderful and very valuable program. So what is Kids on Campus? It's a partnership, as Steve has explained, between ACCT and the National Head Start Association, designed to co-locate more early learning childcare opportunities through Head Start on college campuses to provide more convenient and affordable childcare offerings for our student parents. And as Steve mentioned, there are a number of benefits to being able to have these types of services on campus for our student parents. It's improving student learning outcomes. The benefits to colleges includes improving persistence and retention rates for students. Oftentimes when students may stop out or drop out of school, a lot of that has to do with the lack of childcare needs and services. And when the choice has to be made between, you know, if I can't find someone to provide support for me in watching my child versus going to class, and if I can't take the child with me to class, which gets into another thing that we've heard in some of our interviews about some of the policies related to children on campuses, then you know this opportunity and having access on campus is definitely a benefit for our students. And as Steve mentioned, just addressing some of the challenges that exist both at the community college level and also within Head Start programs around staffing issues. So when we look at the project design, there are really three key components to our design. One, the first is around screening, and we start off with what we call our screener tool, but it's really an interest form that allows us to gain the interest and capacity of the community college, and then there's a parallel screener that is designed for Head Start programs. And we're able to really get a baseline assessment of just general infrastructure on the community college campus. And so we'll ask questions around, you know, do you have a large indoor and outdoor space that could accommodate students? Have you ever had a child care center on your campus, and is it still currently operational, or is it one that could be utilized, but it will need some work? So there may be renovations and retrofitting that might be necessary. The screener may also ask about your academic programs and services. Steve mentioned how some of the academic programs that are on campus are aligned with some of the services that can be provided through Head Start. And so if you have do you have an early education child care center? Do you have a nursing program where your students may be able to benefit from practica with a Head Start? And then we move into step 2, matchmaking. And this is where the magic happens, if you will. And this is looking at the information that we have been able to obtain and assess through the screener to see, okay, what would this fit look like? If you have, let's say we have a campus that does have a facility on campus and we have a Head Start that is ready to go, what does that timeline look like? So if the campus is ready for the renovations to start immediately and the Head Start is ready to go, then that's one way that we may be able to match the two organizations. We're looking within the Head Start side too. Is Head Start looking to expand slots? Are they looking to have a standalone program on a campus, or are they moving into an existing child care center that may already be on campus, but they're going to bring in this additional type of child care service that can be braided and blended with some of the other accessible child care opportunities that are there? So that's what we look at in the matchmaking process. And then the third tier there is technical assistance, and this is really where the work is done by myself and my director colleague, who is on the National Head Start Association side. And so she's working most closely with the Head Starts. I work most closely with the community colleges. But it's really about us being able to support colleges and provide whatever types of technical assistance would be useful and helpful in moving these partnerships forward. So in some cases, there are some general things that we've learned just through conversations and through the previous focus groups that we had around what types of supports would be helpful to colleges, because one thing that, or major topic that came out of some of the conversations was around, there's great interest in this, there's great passion for it, but where do I start? What do I do? How do you get started with this? And so technical assistance around negotiations, or even before you even come to the table, what should you be thinking about in terms of your own assessment of your institution? What should you know about Head Start? Technical assistance could also include what does retrofitting mean and what does that look like on a campus and how do we get started. Technical assistance could also include who should be on your planning team, thinking through that process and what that would look like. And then we want to hear from colleges because all of these models are going to be unique. This is not anything where we tell you how to do it or there's one way to do it. It's not a cohort model. There's no application process. We're just looking for general interest. And then the two partners come together and they talk about what their needs are individually by organization and then how they want to partner together. So the models can look very different. Not only across colleges, but even across colleges that have multiple campuses. So if you wanted to have a Head Start partnership on your community college and you have three of your campuses working with 3 different Head Starts, the needs of that community will be what will drive that partnership conversation. So again, one more thing I wanted to say. So, and as at the core of this too is, at the most basic level, it would be about the community college providing a space for the Head Start. So it can be as simple as that. We have a space, just come on board, and then Head Start will do everything else and they will run it. But it can also be a lot more advanced, given the other opportunities that Steve mentioned and the benefits to colleges. So again, engaging your students through practical opportunities, connecting those students and families that are in the Head Start to some of the campus services, being able to have more of a partnership where there is a lot more interaction between the two groups. It can be more as advanced as something like that. Again, going with the technical assistance, I mentioned about the green circle, so that would be more, we could be webinars. We're developing an online resource portal that will provide information. We want to have sample documents that will be available to people. So if you're developing an MOU or a contract, you don't have to start from scratch. You will, of course, work with your legal counsel because I don't even play a lawyer on TV. So, so yes, you would need to coordinate with your own campus services, but we can show you sample documents that have been useful or utilized by other programs and projects. The peer learning opportunities, those are opportunities to bring groups together who may be at the same place in the planning process. So a peer learning community could be built around those who are just starting out. It could be around those who are at a more advanced stage and are having similar conversations or issues, but just having an opportunity to learn from each other about what is going on in your process and using the information to make improvements and enhancements or whatever modifications might be necessary. Partnership coaching, that can be an individual conversation between me and my director colleague and colleagues or staff on your campuses, or it could be some type of group conversation with your planning team. Some of these coaching conversations have been around, how do I get buy-in on my campus? You may have one champion on your campus who has to try to sell everybody else onto this concept. So what could those conversations look like, and what are some of the questions that you could ask? And then some other individual areas that people may just want to just have a thought partner to work with some of these issues. And then finally, I think I mentioned the template and resource development, and that will, again, just be some sample documents, some FAQs that would be beneficial to partnerships as they're getting started. And then lastly, we've also developed, so from the information that was gathered through those focus groups, the team also has developed a resource guide, a user guide, and this is available on our website. It is forward-facing because what we're really hoping to do through this project is be a resource and provide information that will allow anyone who has an interest in doing this to be able to do it with support, or you can just go to the resource guide and use that as a step-by-step to help you walk through this process. And that is, we have 4 different components. Before you begin, I think I mentioned some of the self-reflection questions you may want to ask and some of the information you may want to have at hand before you even start getting into these conversations with the potential partner. The second step or part of that user guide is around partnership profiles, and we give you a few models examples of existing partnerships so that you can take a look and see, you know, what does this look like? Is there an institution that seems similar to my institution, and maybe there's something that we can learn from here, and also people that you could possibly contact directly to see what their experience has been like. The third section of this is about navigating negotiations, and that gets into some of the questions that you should ask. What are the things that should be considered as you are walking through this process and developing your MOUs and contracts? And then finally, launching your partnership, and just some general information around marketing and communications, because having worked on several college campuses, it's always interesting that we have all of these wonderful projects and programs and services, but people often don't know about them. And so, you know, making sure that we have a strong marketing campaign so that students are aware that these resources actually exist on your campus and how to get connected to them.
Okay, so now for the fun part. Not that that wasn't fun, but now we want to hear
Gee,
like a
thanks.
live action. And full disclosure, okay, so this partnership, Howard Community College and Community Action Council of Howard County actually started this process before we even launched our project. And if you were at NLS, our National Legislative Summit in February of this year, we had a launch of the project itself. And so we have actually learned a lot from their example, but we've also tried to support them, and especially moving forward as we develop other resources. You know, there's always going to be bumps in the road, and so anything we can do to help support that partnership. And we've also been able to lift this up as a great example of what these partnerships can look like. So before we get into some questions, I want to, most of us in this room, or all of us in this room, are familiar with community colleges. I don't know how many of you are familiar with community action agencies and what they do, so I'm going to turn it to Tracy to let her talk a little bit about what community action agencies are and what she does at the Community Action Council of Howard County.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So a show of hands, how many of you know what community action is? Okay, so like 10%.
Oh, that's good.
10% maybe? Okay. So we are Howard County, Maryland. All right, how many of you know where that is? No? Oh, even, okay. No, Maryland? How about that? Okay. Okay, so we are the Community Action Council of Howard County. We are part of the Maryland Community Action Partnership. We are one of 17 community action agencies in Maryland, of over 1,100 in the nation. Every county or region has one. So if you don't know yours, look it up. It's great. We have been in existence since 1965. Community Action was created as part of President Johnson's War on Poverty and the Economic Opportunity Act, the same act that was paired with its sister act of the Civil Rights Act. The design was to eliminate poverty in our nation. The champion of that, for those historians in the room, was Sergeant Shriver. If anybody wants to look it up, just a fascinating story, and it was the first real foray of the federal government and skipping over states to put federal dollars into local communities to address poverty. In Howard County, we have a very unique, we're a very affluent county, and a place where oftentimes people say that there isn't need, but there is. And for us, Community Action takes the flavor of 5 core programs, and Community Action in your neighborhood might look different because, again, the design of Community Action is to meet very localized needs. For us, we provide housing assistance, which includes eviction prevention, first month's rent. We like to keep people housed. We are the county's local energy assistance agency. We run the Howard County Food Bank. It is like a little bodega. It's a little grocery store where people can come and shop. It's fabulous. We also are the state's largest weatherization provider. We're going into low and moderate income households and assessing their energy efficiency to lower their energy bills. And we operate 5 early childhood locations across our county. Our 5th one being this wonderful Children's Learning Center at HCC. We just celebrated late last month the ribbon cutting, so we're fresh here with lots of learning to share. We are also, Maryland has something called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, and it has 6 pillars, but one of them, the very first pillar, is universal pre-K. And what that has done for us, at the same time as implementing with our partners here at HCC, has taken a look at Head Start and our Head Start footprint, if you will, in the county, because the blueprint allows for families up to 300% of federal poverty to access pre-kindergarten through their public school, but the law also requires that 50% of the available pre-K slots in our community must be provided by community providers, and we are the county's largest provider of that as well. But it also allows us to look at all income levels and how we can meet that. More on that later. And this is just a little picture of Howard County. So in Howard County, as I mentioned, very affluent. We like to point as a community action agency and within the community action network, not just at federal poverty, but at self-sufficiency. And what that means, and I'm sure you all are familiar with that standard, what it takes to actually live based on your household size and makeup, how many kids you have, how many adults are in the home, where you live. In Howard County, if you are a two-parent household and you have the most expensive type of child, an infant or a preschooler, they're very pricey, you have to make over $146,000 to be self-sufficient. But the federal government says you can't make more than 31.2. So we have quite the challenge in our neighborhood to be able to address the needs of our student parents on the HCC campus, but also our neighbors and in the community. So I'm not going to go there because that's part of the questions, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so you can see it's not just about the child care partnership piece. Community action agencies are fantastic partners for community colleges. There's a lot of those wraparound services that your institutions may or may not provide. They can help leverage their resources plus partner on a variety of others. So now I want to get into a little bit about some questions for the panel around how these things started, what are they doing, and where are they going from here. So let's start with Howard Community College. So this is both for Jarrett and Feli. If you could talk a little bit about how did the partnership start, who was part of the planning team, and what some of those early conversations were.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Jared Carter, not Darius J. Willis, our dynamic president, who is on a trade mission with our county government over in Europe to create some MOUs for workforce development. So I'm happy to try and adequately stand in for her. But I think the story of how we got started goes back to or past what was the conversation with Tracy and CAC. Our campus had child care provision and facility dating back to 2000. And even before we get into that conversation, I think it's important to understand just how dramatic the child care need has been nationally. Even in 2017, there was a report issued that child care resources on campus had dropped 10% between 2007 and 2017. So this is before the pandemic. You're losing child care facilities. How did that happen? Eligibility standards got more stringent, costs became higher. So it was more difficult to keep them open just because of the nature of cost expansion. So before you even get to a public health global crisis, you lost a tenth of the nation's child care provision on community college campuses. But Howard Community College persisted. I will defer to our interim chair, who was in leadership at the time of a transition for us during that period, and then we'll kind of double back to how we got started with CAC.
Thank you. So I'm Feli Sola-Carter. At the time of the pandemic, I was the board chair. Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. Okay. I don't. Yeah, I'm worried that's not. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Is this better? Okay, good. Closer? Okay. How's that? Raise your hand if you can hear me. Okay, thank you. All right, apologies for that. So my name is Feli Sola-Carter. I've been on the board since 2016, but as you know, our center dates back to 2000. So the center was already in place at the time that the pandemic started. In 2020, when things really became very challenging because of this national health situation, the board made a decision that we could not possibly invite kids on campus when we could not invite adults on campus because of the nature of the COVID pandemic. And of all the decisions that we had to make at that time in the context of the health situation and the challenges in our area, the most difficult one was the closing of the child care center. It was such a lifeline for the families that we supported, the students, and members of the community, because our center was open to not only our students and faculty, but to others as slots were available. And this was the most significant public relations, health, funding, you name it, issue that surfaced because there was such passion around the subject. So I wanted to share that with you because once you embark on this trajectory, this essential service, there's no doubt about it, you need to be aware that the day you decide that you may no longer be able to provide it, you will face some very severe pushback. Our pledge, and I know the pledge because I was the chair, I remember making this at a very contentious board meeting, making the announcement, was that as soon as circumstances changed and we were able to reopen campus and be safety for children to be on there, we would indeed restart our child care center. Now, what you need to understand is that what was a dire, dark moment became a bright opportunity because it gave us the time and space and ability to consider should this look like based on the lessons we have learned from having a successful on-site facility and based on our relationship with Tracy and the CAC team, what would be the ideal view for this? How should this be constructed? How should it be placed? What would the space be like? What would be the optimal solution? We take great pride in Howard County in having one of the best community colleges, if not the best, in the universe. And I'm sure as trustees, you probably feel the same way about your institution, so I welcome you to come visit ours. But that was very, very foremost on our minds. And one of the issues that became very clear is that while we had internally thought of the child care center as serving the needs of individuals in the community that were perhaps eligible for other benefits and so on. Interestingly enough, the composition at the time included some percentage of community members who were not on a needs-based, had access, not on needs-based, but on other issues. And those were the parents that were most vocal when it came time to closing the center. So my advice is that you should by all means pursue this. It's an essential element of success for our studies, our students. By all means, find partners who have the caliber of experience, wisdom, expertise that Tracy brings to you, because she really is one of the shining lights in our community. There's no doubt about it. And her organization has solid standing. It has the support of our county government, which I cannot underscore how critical that is for any activity that you want to carry out, and of course of our state government as well. So, thank you.
So, you can see the urgency that we had to have going into it, and this coincided with the arrival of Dr. Willis in 2022, who brought to the campus a real focus on 2-gen approaches to teaching and learning and community service, right? So, you had a board. You had a president who agreed that child care was going to be central to the success and the growth of the campus. That was big. You had need in the community. We had no problems with where the census for the center would come from. So we had demand and we had will. We had legislative support. So all of the baseline things were in place for such a center to be successful. But how do you do that without drain on the college's budget, particularly when you're emerging out of her funding and post-pandemic economic models for colleges, right? So this is where we start to consider opportunities for C-Campus grant, which we successfully got for $1 million, awarded that in 2023. But along the way, and just before, just into Dr. Willis's tenure, she started having conversations with Tracy. So this begins early, late 22, early 23. And the determination is made, okay, we have a facility, you have the blueprint for infrastructure. Now, how do we start to think about what are the things that you have to have for Head Start? What are the things that we have to accommodate our academic calendar and accommodate the census that we want to make available for students, employees, and community members? So that in a nutshell, I think, provides you the way that a conversation with a partner can kind of begin.
Thanks. So that's, it's interesting to hear. I think we're familiar with hearing from what the perspective is from the community college, but this is a very unique partnership. Mm-hmm. So Tracy, if you could talk a little bit about the partnership from your side, but then also, like, what were some of the key factors in like negotiation and priorities? We've heard a little bit about Howard's priorities. Just to make sure the partnership works. We said this looks very different across every partnership, so we know organizations need to make sure that they meet the needs of their constituents. So,
absolutely. So even before this, Community Action Council of Howard County has had a long partnership with HCC. We've held the Head Start grant in Howard County since 1979, and Jared alluded to the 2G model. It's embedded in Head Start, and when Dr. Willis arrived, she's an Aspen Fellow. I mean, she's that two-gen, it runs through her veins. So it was just this natural marriage, if you will, of, okay, it's time to make sure that there's this wraparound in our community. So we had the foundation, we had the friendship, the partnership, we had the backing of the community to recognize that there was a significant need. And the building was there. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things you have to figure out, right, is where's the money going to come from to do this? Let me go back to this slide with the circles. Where's this
one?
There
it is.
Okay. All right. This is really confusing. But Head Start has its own set of standards. It is, when you're a Head Start grantee, there's this book called the Standards. It's about this big, and it has a lot of things in it. And you have to marry what those are. And for us, for every red dollar, cent, whatever, of Head Start that touches a classroom, that's what you have to follow. It doesn't matter if you're bringing in other dollars, whether it's state or local. That's what you have to follow. So we have to think very carefully about how much Head Start is there and how much we needed to make sure that we were continuing to meet community needs. So for us, we're bringing lots of funding to the table. So we have our Head Start slots, not we have 264 as a program. That's not all of that is not sitting at the campus. You saw that we have five locations. So and Head Start does allow, as Steve mentioned, for us to move things around. So in order to open this in a timely manner, we had like this nice long planning year, but then the county executive said to Dr. Willis and I, hey, can you move that up like 6 months? So you would not believe this team's facilities staff, they're like wild things growing out in the backyard. And like, remember where the wild things are? That was the backyard of the playground. Their team like stepped up, leadership, all top down, stepped up facilities. I mean, this place is absolutely gorgeous. I just want to move in and live there. But we and my team showed up at the table with the planning, our fiscal, everybody came to the table. We formed a project team. And we said, what are the requirements? And we had to have sub-project teams because it was like, well, how do we handle enrollment? How do we know? Because C-Campus dollars are touching this, and that involves Pell eligibility. Mm-hmm. And while there's flexibility with C-Campus dollars, you can use it to pay for staffing or you can use it to pay for the children. Regardless, there has to be a Pell eligibility confirmation. Well, HCC sees that. We don't see that. So we have to talk about the exchange of PII. We have to talk about the exchange of dollars. What does that look like? We have requirements as a community action agency. They have requirements. Obviously, you guys have that as a community college. So all of that is all tied up, right, with the funding. So we've got state dollars touching this. You've got Head Start slots that we moved from another location to here. We brought some state dollars that allow us to reach up into parents who are making more than that ridiculously low, no offense, federal poverty level. We have a child care scholarship in Maryland that allows us to extend our day. So kids, student parents who have classes that start at 4 o'clock mm-hmm. can continue to keep their children there. And then we have a supplementary state grant that allows us to continue into the summer because Head Start doesn't last all year long. So we want to make sure families can stay. And then we have local commitment. Our county executive made a commitment of over $750,000 to community action for us to supplement families who maybe make too much for Head Start but need to use the child care scholarship, but to bring in sort of that last dollar in so that they can continue to access this service and continue to go to school. So it was a lot. We had the funding, we have the funding, and it has made it incredibly, I don't want to say easy, but it's made it possible for us to design a program that meets community needs, and it brought all the players to the table because we've built that partnership and we've had it. So I can't really emphasize that enough.
Yeah.
No, that's so important, and I think, you know, Tracy, you touched on a lot of sort of what it took to get started, your planning teams and all those types of things. So I'll turn back to Howard Community College here. So like once all those details were finalized, what type of, and this is something that you may or may not think about, is what are some of the college operations or additional things that, you know, you may not even think about, oh, now we've got this Children's Learning Center on campus, who's going to clean it, who's going to, you know, provide public safety for it, access, all of those things. So what are some of the things that Howard sort of had to look at and maybe incorporate once that partnership was
and
finalized?
I think that you talked about in the first presentation where you talked the landlord-tenant agreement. A lot of it was done like that. So Tracy jokes about where the wild things were going in the back of it. We had actually, post-pandemic, used the facility as like an athletic field house. So it wasn't inoperable or unused space that was just sitting. We still had functionality behind it, but then you have to think about, okay, so we had to change out the toilets in the facility that were small for kids, and now we make them for adults. And then, all right, now how do we landscape around the facility? How do we think about locks and things that are appropriate for security and those things? So those were kind of the facility considerations that we had. But again, to stress the effort of, we already had the building. So I don't know if everybody in here has the advantage of having a facility that they could use, but that was made so much easier because we already had it. And so if you're somebody who's trying to build or secure facility, that's much different from if you already have something that's available. And you might want to use the creativity to say, what is something that we have that exists to make this a little more transitional when we get a partner and when we get some support. The other thing that I would say is our planning team, which was led in large part by our Associate Vice President, Zakiya Reeves-Johnson, really incorporated the teaching and learning component into this, right? So this was more than just an opportunity to create seats for childcare for our students, for our employees, for the community, but it was also an opportunity to embed some of that teaching and learning component. So the training for a lot of our students who would be in early childhood was there as well. So all along the way, we're designing facility and designing programming that had two things in mind: what's available for the community, and how can our students who could possibly be apprentices there, who could possibly be training there, would also have the opportunity. Now, I don't know if it's premature to get here about challenges, but certainly the legalese behind it, and I'll let Tracy talk a little bit more about that, but getting your general counsel and your legal advisement in sync is a critical part of that, because things that are appropriate and necessary for a partner like Community Action Council may not be in synergy with what the school needs. That's not to say that they're antagonistic or there's tension. There's just different standards that we have to meet. And so when the lawyers get in the room, they say that, no, these standards have to meet, or this might be a no-go, and that could be a real threat to that kind of progress. Everybody knows that's what the attorneys are supposed to do. But you have to, in some cases, and I know Tracy and Dr. Willis did this, they had to step in and say, okay, we get the legality of it, we're going to be legal, but this is what we're trying to accomplish. So how do you help us accomplish this and not say, no, we can't do it? Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think there's a section on the contract in here. So, you know, Community Action holds the license. So for us, that's the liability, right? We have the responsibility to answer to the state of Maryland, who licenses us, and we have to comply with the Code of Maryland regulations. So when we come to the table as the license holder, and HCC's, you know, is the facility holder, we have to say, well, we have to have this kind of thing in the building, right? So they assume the risk of the building. So there's that mutual understanding of mutual risk, right? So that took a little bit of nuance in negotiation, and that's fair. That's absolutely fair and should be expected. And it wasn't something like, well, forget it, I'm taking my ball and going home. It was certainly a, how do we make this work? Because keeping in view what we were trying to accomplish. So things like, I just listed a few things that how long, what's the contract in place? How long is it going to be? Are we just sticking to the period of the grant? We decided we're not doing that, right? This is to meet community needs, and we will continue to partner. It's not something that's grant contingent, because we all know we want sustainability. I mentioned this before, like financial. How do we handle dollars? Even since our contract was signed, we've made a revision because it wasn't making sense the way we had it. It was like quarterly or something. Like, why are we doing that? Let's do it monthly. It makes more sense to do it that way. Exchange of information, how to use the space. Jared alluded to this. Zakia on his team and Aaron Adelsberger on my team are working very closely that now that we have it open, okay, who's next that needs access? It's a lab school. It was functioning as a lab school. So there's like observation rooms that you could have student teachers watching, lessons, or they could be in the rooms as student teachers. So during the pandemic, the state of Maryland changed background checks requirements. So we had to put that into, like, you can't just walk in, right? And you can't just volunteer. Like, things have changed legally since the center was open before. So we have to work that out. Did we make that stop us from opening? No, we did not. We said, let's get it open. Let's offer the baseline as we are, and then we continue our project teams, continue to work on it so that we can continue to meet the needs of the students at HCC, the needs of the community, and to be able to be a model of instruction, because as a Head Start program and a Blueprint program, we have to meet exceptionally high needs, or standards rather. And then, of course, the facilities use, maintenance, that kind of thing. Again, the HCC facilities team is like phenomenal. Can't even continue to brag on them. Sorry. Anyway, and then, I'm just kind of going through.
Keep going.
Do you want me to keep going? Sorry. So just really quickly, funding sources, continuing to seek after grants. Both of our organizations have strong resource development philanthropy that goes on. And that is important because, yes, we have monies in our grants to purchase equipment, but we have donors in the community who are like, hey, you're going to offer infants and toddlers over at HCC? Can I buy the cribs? Can I buy the strollers? Sure. Yep. Because you know what? We can then use that equipment stuff in the grant for something else. So that is something that we continue to work on. Obviously, recruitment for parents. HCC has an active recruitment going on, right, to recruit the student parents. But we also, Head Start has a whole big deal about how to recruit Head Start eligible families and how long we can hold Head Start slots open. So that's another point of negotiation that we have to say, all right, let's make sure we've got our pool and we've got everybody's got because Head Start requires us to do a selection criteria. So for example, if you're homeless, you get bumped to the top of the list. So that is, we have to work on that as well, or we have worked on that. So we have a whole plan in place for that as well. As I said, our project teams are continuing, expansion of age groups, expansion of time. So there are classes at nighttime at HCC. We haven't figured that out yet, but we're getting there. How do we access funding for that? Is that the use of the Child Care Scholarship as well? Because our Head Start only allows for during the day in the particular model and the funding that they have. There are some additional, challenges. Again, funding, right? We want to make sure that our funding continues. As Steve mentioned, Head Start is a 5-year grant, so you have that stability there. As a Blueprint partner, we have stability there. There isn't a bucket of funding that we anticipate will disappear. So that is, but you want to continue to find other sources so you can do more and more and do better and better for our student parents. Again, remaining decisions, opening that up to student teaching, addressing over-income neighbors, over-income staff. Do we want to do that? That's a philosophical decision that we have to discuss, right? Is that something, if there's room, do we want to do that? And more discussion to be had, obviously. And then making sure that there's efficient processes for protecting student data while also complying with the tight Head Start enrollment timelines.
So I think, so we want to be able to take questions. So I want to just wrap up with one more opportunity, and that is, sort of what are some advice you would give, both from the Head Start perspective and the community college perspective, on this partnership? Like, what have you learned? What are some good next steps?
I'll start. I'll be brief. As a trustee, keep the end goal in mind. You will hear from every member in the community who has a stake in this issue, but you are less likely to hear from those who need it the most. Okay? So remember that the reason that we exist is tied closely to the success of our neediest community members, to our youngest community members, right, who may not have a voice speaking for them. So be mindful that at the end of the day, you want to be able to say that on our campus, anyone and everyone, regardless of age, status, etc., has a place. And our goal is to make sure that you succeed once you reach this place and move forward. Thank you.
I would quickly say, one, really connect and embed child care provision as part of wraparound services for your students. So use that infrastructure to say, hey, do you have problems with food insecurity? Are there issues with housing? Do you need something with English as a second language support? Like, use that platform to really take the opportunity to introduce other elements. One, for degree persistence, and two, quality of the campus experience. I think we do a great job of that at HCC, of making that part of a composite student experience, and that our campus is really taking on the identity of supporting student parents. So even if you're a student without a child, you're somebody who's supporting student-parent access, right? This is something we talk about. It's something we live by. It's something you see when you're walking across the campus. It's something in addition to lactation rooms. It's something in addition to programming that you see. So we're really taking on the identity of supporting student parents. The other thing is, in the advocacy perspective and fundraising perspective, that we really treat the topic itself more than just the moral imperative for childcare and for children, but also as an economic development, a poverty eradication tool. So when you're having these conversations with legislators, you can say, we are better off if we have 50 more childcare slots in this county or in this city. You will have people that will be able to work stably. You'll have people that are able to earn degrees and transform that into tax revenue, turn that into increased or retention of people who live in a community, and we're not losing as many to nearby jurisdictions. So those conversations that you have with your legislative partners, from the governor on down, we are better served when we are able to increase more child care slots. I think, and I hope Tracy would agree, that's the kind of conversation that really moves the meter from municipal to state. When you can say we are more productive and we are a more attractive place to live and we are more economically viable if we have more of these slots available.
And in addition to that, for sure, I would also say don't give up, right? And elevate, as Jarrett said, as Feli said, elevate the need and don't be afraid to be provocative, because there's a lot of myths out there about families who struggle, about students who struggle. They want what you want, right? They want a safe, secure home. They want their children educated. They want something better than what they perhaps might be experiencing. And you have the opportunity, by partnering together with Community Action, Head Start, community college, and your local and state governments, to make clearly innovative models that make long-term difference. So, be that example, be an example.
All right, so just wanted to give you a snapshot. This was the ribbon cutting that we attended, as Tracy mentioned earlier. So we were very excited to be part of that. And now, very quickly, so we can take a couple of questions, I want to turn it back to Mia real quick, so she can talk about, now that everyone in the room is ready to participate in this project, how do you do that? So,
Great. Now, I'll be very quick here. And I really just I'm going to highlight step one, because that's where we get started. I mentioned previously the screener or interest form. It would be really helpful, and I'm just going to make a very direct ask and say, at the end of this, we do have a QR code to our website, and that is where you can find the screener document. If you can complete that for us, that gives us, again, your interest, it gives us a contact point, and then we can follow up directly with your institution and begin this work. The next step is around the self-study. That's a deeper dive into some of the information that you'll provide in that screener document. Then we move into the technical assistance work that I mentioned, and the peer learning and the coaching. And then finally, when we get to step 4, we're there. We've established, or at least we've signed a letter of commitment. So the center may not be up and functioning, but there has been a letter of commitment signed, or an MOU or contract that says, I, as a community college, and this Head Start, we are interested, and we have made a commitment to move forward toward establishing a full partnership, and then we do the work. We continue to do the work from there.
so this is the QR code. And also our website is kidsoncampus.org. So I'll leave that up. So are there any questions?
Steve, may I add just very quickly?
Yep,
And
sure.
it's a very short survey. From the timer that we have on the survey, it's been taking people 6 minutes or less, if that. So, yeah,
what
don't be scared.
So here's a question.
So, with your partnership, do you have a representative on campus to help the students go through all the paperwork? It's extensive paperwork. So, because usually, a Head Start system, you have one agency and it's like way across town and you're here. So, do you have someone who is actually on campus?
Yes. So every Head Start parent is assigned to a family service worker at the very beginning. So they can for us, we have a universal application that gives access to all of our services. They can do it that way, or they can walk right up to the center, and the family service worker is located there with the center manager. Yeah.
Yes, question over here. Yes, you.
I just was wondering, because I know Head Start also has some early Head Start.
Yes.
But I didn't hear you mention that, so does that include early Head Start?
So it will, yes. For us, before opening the CLC, we had no facilities for littlers, infants and toddlers. The CLC has infants and toddlers, so spaces, I should say. And so we are, reallocating some of our Head Start slots for early Head Start.
We've
Yes.
seen that with, yes, so it's not limited to Head Start. It's early Head Start, and some of the other categories as well.
So does that also include like pre-K from your local district as well?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Universal pre-K?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so because of the and this is happening nationally when states introduce universal pre-K, Head Start sort of, I don't want to use the word suffers, but starts to reduce. Most Head Start programs reallocate to early Head Start. So
Right.
we're in the process of doing that right now.
Just one last question, so what about Head Start reviews? Does that include the college, community college? Are they part of the Head Start reviews for
They will this time around, yes. We went through our FA1 and 2. Good luck. Hey. It's fun.
What other questions do we have? So I have myself and Mia's contact information. Feel free to reach out. That's the QR code to our website again. I do want to thank our amazing panel. I think this was a very great discussion, and hopefully you've learned a lot. And I think one of the key takeaways for me is every partnership can look different. This is one fantastic model, but there are countless ways to do this, so don't be afraid. And what we also found was, with all the challenges, there were no challenges. No one said that any of the challenges were too insurmountable to make this happen.
That's right.
So I think it's important. We heard from the leadership buy-in from both Dr. Willis and Tracy and the board, and I think that is key. The lawyers will say one thing, but if you have the leadership saying, no, we're going to do this and we're going to figure it out, and I think that's key. So thank you for coming. Hopefully we'll be around if you have questions.